cold fact. Power doesn't move against what it dislikes. Power moves against what it can afford. The thing it can't afford doesn't get punished. It gets postponed quietly, indefinitely, and nobody ever tells the person involved. That's what happened to you. Somewhere you'll never see, somebody worked out what it would actually take to remove you. Not emotionally, numerically. What it would cost, who it would touch, what would have to be rebuilt afterwards. That's routine work in that world. It gets done about people constantly, and most of the time it comes back cheap, and the thing proceeds. Yours came back high. High enough that the person holding it stopped wanting their name on it. And you felt none of that. You only felt the silence afterwards, and you decided the silence meant you didn't matter. Hit that like button and subscribe to pay this message back and push it toward every chosen one who braced for something that never came and called themselves dramatic afterwards. Let's continue. Now understand how that world actually functions, because your mind is picturing something far too personal. You're imagining somebody deciding they'd had enough of you, a moment of anger, a verdict delivered by a person who dislikes you. It doesn't work that way, and this is the part that will reorganize how you think about the last stretch of your life. Nothing there moves on feeling, it moves on cost. Somebody wants a thing done. Somebody else has to work out what it takes. And then a third person, usually the one with the most to lose, has to put their name on it. That last step is where almost everything dies, because signing means owning it. It means that if the cost turns out to be higher than the estimate, the person who signed is the person standing there when the invoice arrives. So the question in that room was never, do we dislike this person? The question was, what does it cost to move them, and who's willing to carry that? And when they costed you, they found things they hadn't expected to find. They found that you were connected to more than your position suggested. Not powerful. Connected, which is different and harder to price. They found that several arrangements they were relying on had you somewhere inside them, quietly, in ways nobody had ever written out. They found that the story they'd have to tell about you afterwards would need to hold up in front of people who'd actually met you, and that's the most expensive line item there is. And they found the thing nobody says out loud in those rooms, that you'd cost more gone than you were costing present. That's not a compliment. Nobody meant it kindly. It's just what the universe had arranged while you were busy assuming you were disposable. And hey, chosen one, yes, you, mark this one. Drop 777 in the comments, not for luck, not as a charm, as your signal that you're finished treating your own caution as a character flaw. Hit like, subscribe. You're not following a channel, you're standing with the people who got assessed and never told. And if this is truly yours, if it's landing where it's supposed to land, you'll feel the pull to stay until the very end. Because the last part is where you find out what made the number so high. Before we go one step further, understand how this stays standing. There's a link in the description. It's sitting in the pinned comment at the top as well, so nobody has to go hunting for it. That link is the only reason these messages keep getting made. It's held open by chosen ones who decided this work was worth protecting. If something already moved in your chest, that's your answer. Support it if you're able. Share the channel if you're not. Both carry the same weight here, and nobody's keeping score. Hit like so this stops getting buried. Subscribe so you never have to find your way back. And send this channel to one person who's been bracing for something that was quietly cancelled. Now let's go step by step. Chapter 1. Somebody worked out what removing you would actually cost. Not whether, what it would cost. That question gets asked long before anybody decides anything. Chosen one, let's tear the curtain open on how that work actually gets done. It isn't dramatic. It's somebody sitting with a problem and listing what touches it, who'd have to be told, what would have to be explained. which arrangements would need rebuilding, and how long each one takes. That list gets long fast when the person being costed has been around a while and has been quietly useful in ways nobody itemized. Imagine this: somebody starting that assessment expecting it to take an afternoon, and still working on it 3 days later, because every time they trace one thread it turns out to be attached to 2 more. Imagine this: a line on that assessment that just says unclear. Not because the person doing it is lazy, because there genuinely isn't a way to know what happens when you take out something that was never mapped. Or picture the moment it turns, somebody looking at the total and going quiet, not shocked, just recalculating what they're about to walk into and whether they want to be the one holding it. And maybe you're wondering, why would anybody spend that much effort on me? Because effort is proportional to difficulty, not to importance. You were difficult. That's the whole answer, and it's the only compliment that world ever pays. Was I really that connected? Not in the way you're imagining. You weren't important. You were load-bearing in about 6 places nobody had ever drawn. Why did nobody notice that before? Because nothing had gone wrong. Load-bearing is invisible until somebody proposes removing it, and then it's the only thing on the page. Here's what you should take from that, and it'll take a few days to land properly. You've spent years measuring yourself by how you were treated in the room. That's the wrong instrument. How somebody treats you and what it costs to remove you are 2 entirely separate numbers, and only one of them ever gets acted on. You were treated as though you were cheap. You were costed as though you weren't. Both of those were happening at once, and only one of them was ever shown to you. Think about a wall somebody wants gone. Everybody in that house has opinions about the wall. It's ugly, it's in the way, it makes the room dark. Then somebody opens it up to check and finds the entire upper floor is sitting on it, and every opinion in that house becomes irrelevant in about 4 seconds. Nobody thanks a wall. They just quietly stop discussing it. And you should notice what that does to your own memory of that place. You've been going back over it looking for the moment you failed. The meeting where you should have spoken. The thing you should have pushed for. Some misstep that explains why you were treated the way you were. There's no misstep. You've been auditing the wrong ledger for years. You're not somebody who got it wrong. You're somebody who was priced correctly and treated incorrectly at the same time. You're not looking back at a failure. You're looking back at an arrangement that had nothing to do with your performance. You're not the reason it went the way it went. You're the reason it couldn't go further. You weren't tolerated because they liked you. You were left standing because the estimate came back wrong. Chapter 2. The number went to somebody who had to put their name on it. Here's the step everybody outside that world misses, and it's the step where things actually die. Nothing gets done on an assessment alone. Assessments are cheap. Somebody senior has to authorize it, and authorizing means owning the outcome. That's the whole machine. Everything else is noise around a signature. Imagine this: a person reading through what it would take in their own office, alone, nodding along at first, and then reaching the section that describes what has to be rebuilt afterwards, and stopping and reading that part twice. Imagine this: the same person doing the calculation nobody writes down, not what it costs the organization, what it costs them personally if it goes badly, and who'll remember, and how long that memory lasts. Or picture the version that happens most often. They don't refuse. Refusing is a decision with a name on it too. They ask for more information, and that request is a burial, and everybody in that room understands it as one. Why wouldn't they just do it anyway? Because people at that level didn't get there by carrying other people's estimates. They got there by knowing which ones to leave on the desk. Doesn't that mean they were afraid of me? Not of you personally, of being the one standing next to the result when somebody asks who approved this. Am I supposed to believe I was that significant? You're supposed to understand that significance has nothing to do with it. A small item with an unclear cost is more dangerous to sign than a large item with a clear one every time. And here's what that means for the years you've spent replaying it all. You've been looking for the moment somebody decided to spare you. There was no such moment. There was a person who put a piece of paper down and picked up something else, and the entire course of your life turned on an act with no drama in it whatsoever. That's how almost everything important in your life has actually been decided. Not against you, not for you, just left by somebody who had a busy afternoon. Think about a form that needs one signature to become real. It's complete. Everything on it is accurate. Every other box is filled in. It sits in a drawer for years, and it never becomes a thing that happened because one person never picked up a pen. That's what exists about you, and that's worth understanding properly, because the two feel identical from where you were standing. Being rescued means somebody chose you. It creates a debt and it can be withdrawn. Somebody who saves you can stop saving you, and you spend the rest of your time managing that. Nothing here was chosen. Nobody decided in your favor. A total sat on a desk and a hand didn't move. You're not indebted to anybody for this. You're not carrying a favor you'll have to repay. There's no favor and no creditor. You're not dependent on somebody continuing to like you. You're standing on a number, and numbers don't change their mind about a person. You weren't rescued. You were shelved, and shelved is stronger than rescued because there's nobody to change their mind. Hold here for a second, chosen one. You're well past the point where most people scroll away. That says something about what you're actually looking for. If this is reaching you, keep the signal alive. The support link is in the description, and it's pinned at the top of the comments, so it's never more than one tap away. Every contribution that comes through it pays for another message like this one, for somebody who hasn't found their way here yet. Not everyone can give. Nobody here is asking you to. Sharing the channel costs nothing and travels further than money ever does. So take whichever one is yours. Like the video. Subscribe. Pass this channel to someone who's been treating their own instincts as a defect. Back to it. Chapter 3. The quiet you've been living in is that unsigned number sitting on a desk. This is the part that will make sense of a stretch of your life you've never been able to explain. There was a period where things went strange. Not hostile. Strange. The pressure you'd been living under eased slightly, and instead of relief you felt something worse. A sense of being handled at a distance, of things being decided about you somewhere out of earshot. You couldn't name it and you had nobody to tell. Imagine this, a conversation that used to be difficult becoming oddly smooth. Somebody who'd been pushing suddenly not pushing, and you looking for the trap in it, because in your experience easy has always been a setup. Imagine this, a decision that affects you being made without you in the room, and the outcome being fine, genuinely fine, and you not trusting it for 6 months. Or picture the most disorienting one. Somebody who'd been clearly working against you becoming pleasant. Not warm. Correct. The professional politeness of a person who's been told to leave something alone. Why did that feel worse than the pressure did? Because pressure at least tells you where you stand. Being quietly deprioritized gives you nothing to push against, and you're built to push. Was I imagining the change? You weren't. Something did change. In a room, on a specific day, and the change was real even though the event was invisible. Will anybody ever confirm it? Nobody. There's no announcement when a thing gets shelved. The absence of an announcement is the entire mechanism. Here's what you should do with that, and it isn't what you'd expect. That strange season wasn't a lull between two attacks. You've been treating it as one. You've been waiting, some part of you, for the second half to arrive. It isn't coming. The second half was cancelled before it was written, and the reason you never found out is that cancellation is the only decision in that world that never gets communicated. Think about a scheduled thing that quietly comes off the calendar. Nobody sends a message. Nobody says it's off. The date simply arrives and passes, and life continues, and the only people who know it was ever there are the ones who put it there. You lived through that date without knowing it existed, and here's the part to take out of that season. Because you've been carrying it as evidence against yourself. You've told the story of those months as the time you became irrelevant. The stretch where you stopped mattering and nobody said anything, and you quietly accepted a smaller version of your own life. That's not what those months were. That was the most dangerous period of your adult life, and you walked through it without knowing. You're not somebody who faded. You're somebody who was under review and never informed. You're not less than you were before that season. You're the thing that got assessed and left standing. You're not carrying a decline. You're carrying an outcome, and it went your way. You weren't forgotten in that period. You were declined, and it looked exactly like being forgotten. Chapter 4. What made you expensive was never your strength. This is where you'll want to argue with me, so let's be precise. You've been assuming that if you were costly to move, it must have been because of some power you had, some leverage, something you could have used. You had none. That's what makes this hold. What made you expensive was the shape of you, and shape is not something a person can deploy. Imagine this, somebody trying to work out what you'd do if it happened, not whether you'd fight, what you'd actually do. And finding that the honest answer is nothing dramatic, and that nothing dramatic is the hardest thing in the world to plan around. Imagine this, somebody looking for the pressure point, the thing you couldn't afford to lose, and finding a person who'd already lost most of it and was still turning up. Imagine this, somebody trying to establish who you'd tell, and finding no obvious answer, because you'd stopped telling people things a long time ago, and a person who doesn't broadcast can't be predicted through their audience. Or picture the one that ended the assessment, somebody realizing you'd probably just leave, quietly, without a scene, without a complaint, without any of the noise that would let them frame it afterwards, and that the absence of noise is the worst possible outcome for people who need a version of events. So my lack of options was the protection. That's exactly it, and it's the part nobody wants to hear. You couldn't be threatened efficiently, and efficiency is the only thing that world actually respects. Isn't that just a sad way to be safe? It's not sad. It's cheap, and it cost you everything to get, and it's yours permanently. Won't they eventually find the pressure point? They looked, that's the whole of this. That season you can't explain was them looking, and here's the reframe to sit with. Every quality you've apologized for is on that list. Your unwillingness to make a scene, your habit of absorbing things rather than escalating, the fact that you'd already survived worse and everybody could feel it on you. You've called those things weakness for years. They're the exact line items that pushed the number past what anybody would sign. Think about a lock with no keyhole. There's nothing to pick, nothing to force, nothing anyone can bring a tool to. It isn't strong, particularly. It's just built in a way that offers nothing to work with, and every skill in the world is useless against it. That's what your history built without asking you. And that's why the advice you've been given your whole life never worked on you. Be more assertive. Stand up for yourself. Make it clear you won't accept it. Every one of those instructions assumes the protection comes from resistance. Imagine this, the version of you who took all that advice, louder, sharper, quicker to escalate, now cost that person. That person is cheap, because loud people generate a version of events that can be used, and a scene is the least expensive thing in the world to explain afterwards. You're not badly defended. You're defended in a way nobody has vocabulary for. You're not too soft for that world. You're the shape it has the least to work with. You're not going to be taught this by anybody. You already did it without instruction over years. You're not hard to move because you'd fight back. You're hard to move because you'd go quietly, and quietly leaves them nothing. Chapter 5. They had to keep dealing with you afterwards and pretend nothing happened. Now here's the ongoing cost, and it never ends. Once something gets shelved, everybody who worked on it still has to be in rooms with the subject. Imagine this. Somebody who spent 3 days working out what removing you would take, saying good morning to you the following week, asking about your weekend, meaning it more or less because people compartmentalize beautifully. Imagine this, that same person having to consult you about something, genuinely needing your read on it, and getting a straight, useful answer from you, delivered without a trace of suspicion, because you had no idea. Or picture the version with the longest tail. Somebody defending you later in a small way, in a conversation you'll never hear about. Not out of guilt, because they know exactly how much it costs to move you, and they'd rather nobody started that conversation again. Why would they protect me at all? They're not protecting you. They're protecting themselves from having to reopen a thing they already know is expensive. Doesn't the guilt eat at them? Very little. That's the part people struggle with. It wasn't personal, so there's not much for guilt to attach to. What they carry isn't remorse, it's knowledge, and knowledge is heavier and lasts longer. Am I supposed to be grateful for that? Absolutely not. Nothing here calls for gratitude. It calls for accuracy, and accuracy is more useful to you than any feeling about it. Here's what to take from it, and it's practical. There are people in your life who treat you with a slightly unexplained care, and you've been reading it as warmth or as pity or as something you had to earn. Reread it. Some of that care is arithmetic. Some of the people who are careful with you are careful because they know what you cost, and their care will outlast anybody's affection, because affection changes and numbers don't. Think about somebody who once got a quote for demolishing a building and decided against it. They walk past that building for years afterwards. They never mention it, but they've never once looked at it casually again, and they never will. That's how a handful of people look at you now, and you can stop performing for those people now, which is the practical part. You've been maintaining something, being useful in a slightly heightened way, being agreeable at moments when you didn't feel agreeable, keeping the temperature down in rooms where you'd rather have said something. Imagine this, you not doing that for 1 week, not being rude, just not performing, and nothing happening at all, because nothing about your position was ever resting on the performance. That week is available to you whenever you want it. You're not holding your position together with effort. It's held by arithmetic you had no part in. You're not one bad day away from losing this. There's no version of this that a bad day touches. You're not required to be pleasant to stay safe. You never were, and nobody told you. You weren't spared by kindness. You were spared by a total, and totals don't have moods. Chapter 6. The ones who wanted it done have to live with it not being done. This is where it turns on them, and it turns slowly, which is the best way. Somebody wanted this. That's where the whole thing started. Not the assessor, not the signatory. Somebody wanted you gone, and they were the one who set it moving. That person is still there, and they have to keep seeing you. Imagine this. Somebody who was certain this would be handled within a season, watching a much longer stretch of time go by with you still in it, still turning up, still doing your part, still not removed. Imagine this. Them having to be normal with you every single time. which is a performance, and performances get harder rather than easier the longer they run. Imagine this: them being asked casually by somebody senior whether that thing ever got resolved, and having to say it's in hand, which is a sentence that only works twice. Or picture the version that costs them most: somebody else in that chain deciding quietly that the person who raised it might have been the actual problem. That decision never gets announced. It just changes what gets said in front of them from then on. Why doesn't the wanting fade? Because it can't be discharged. There's no outcome to close it with. An unfinished intention doesn't decay, it accumulates. Isn't that dangerous for me? It's uncomfortable for you and expensive for them. Every month it stays open, their position weakens and yours doesn't move at all. Won't they try again? With what? The same assessment produces the same number, and the second attempt has to explain the first one. And here's the thing to carry: you've been imagining them as satisfied, as people who did what they wanted and moved on with their lives while you were left to deal with the damage. They didn't get what they wanted. That's the actual fact of your situation. You've been grieving a defeat that never happened, in a story where you're the one still standing in the position. Think about somebody who ordered a thing that never arrived. They can't chase it because chasing it means explaining what they ordered. They can't cancel it because it was never confirmed. So they just live with an outstanding item that has no status and no end date. That item is you. And you should see what that does to them over a long stretch, because you've never been shown it. Imagine this: the person who wanted it done at some ordinary point years from now, realizing the whole thing has quietly expired, not been resolved. Expired, the way an intention does when it's carried too long without an outcome. There's no relief in that for them. Just the recognition of a stretch of their life spent on something that produced nothing at all. You spent that same stretch living. You're not the one who lost time to this. You're the only one who got to spend it on something else. You're not carrying that intention. They are, and it doesn't get lighter. You're not their unfinished business by accident. You're the reason they have any. You weren't defeated. You were postponed, and they're the ones who have to hold the postponement. Chapter 7. Your ordinary behavior kept the number high without you knowing. Here's the mechanism nobody explains, and once you see it, you'll see your whole life differently. Every month you kept doing the unremarkable thing. The cost of moving you went up. Not because you were building power, because you were accumulating quiet reliability, and quiet reliability is the most expensive thing in the world to replace. Imagine this: you handling something small and awkward that nobody else wanted to touch. It took you 20 minutes. Nobody noticed. And that 20 minutes became one more line on a list that somebody would eventually have to explain the absence of. Imagine this: you being decent to somebody who had no status at all, somebody nobody was watching, and that person becoming years later one of the people who'd have had to be told, and one of the people who'd have asked why. Imagine this: you keeping your word about something minor at a moment when it would have been easy not to. That's not virtue in this context. That's cost. Predictable people are expensive to remove because everything around them has quietly organized itself on the assumption they'll be there. Or picture the most ordinary one of all: you turning up. On unremarkable days, in unremarkable weather for years. Attendance isn't a quality anybody praises. It's the single hardest thing to price a replacement for. Was I building protection on purpose? Not for a second. And that's exactly why it worked. Anything built on purpose can be seen and countered. This was built by accident, by a person just getting on with it. Why didn't anybody value it while I was there? Because it's not visible in the present tense. It only appears in an estimate of its absence, and estimates only get made when somebody's already decided they want you gone. Is it still building? Every ordinary week, That's the strangest part of your position. You're accumulating protection right now, doing nothing unusual at all. Here's the reframe. You've spent years feeling like your life was too small to matter, too routine, too unremarkable to be worth anything to anybody. The routine is the asset, not despite being boring, because being boring sustained over years is the only thing that produces a number nobody wants to sign. Think about a path worn across a field by people walking the same way every day. Nobody built it, nobody approved it. There's no plan anywhere that includes it. And by the time anybody thinks to close it off, the whole field has organized itself around a route that was never designed. Your life did that. And here's the instruction hidden inside that, which is that there isn't one. You don't have to do anything differently. That's the whole point, and it's the part people find hardest to accept. Imagine this, you deciding to consciously build on this, being strategically reliable, making yourself deliberately essential. The moment it becomes deliberate, it becomes visible, and visible things get planned around. The value of what you've built is that nobody can see you building it, including you. You're not required to maintain this. Maintenance would break it. You're not in charge of your own protection. You never have been, and it's held better than anything you could have arranged. You're not building anything from here. You're just continuing, and continuing is the entire mechanism. You didn't become protected. You became inconvenient to reroute. Chapter 8. They'll never tell you, because telling you is the most expensive thing left. Now we get to the part you've been circling, so let's be honest about it. You want it confirmed. You want somebody to sit down and tell you that it happened, that you weren't imagining the strange season, that there was a real thing with a real number attached. That will never be said to you, not once, not by anyone. Imagine this. Somebody who read the whole assessment standing next to you at a coffee machine discussing something meaningless. They know every line of it. You know nothing, and that gap will hold for the rest of both your lives. Imagine this. Somebody leaving that place entirely, going somewhere new, and taking it with them. Never mentioning it, not even to a spouse, because it's the kind of thing that changes how you're seen by anybody who hears it. Imagine this. The person who wanted it done being asked, years from now, by somebody who half heard something, and giving a short answer that closes the subject, and thinking about it all the way home. Or picture the only version you'll ever get. Somebody looking at you a beat too long during an ordinary conversation, and you noticing and them looking away. That's the disclosure, that's all of it. Why is telling me expensive? Because the moment you know, it becomes an event that happened rather than a thing that didn't. Unsigned items are safe precisely because nobody outside the room knows they exist. Doesn't somebody eventually talk? Not about this. People talk about what got done. Nobody talks about what got costed and abandoned because there's no story in it and there's real exposure. Am I meant to just accept that? You already have. You've been living on the other side of that decision for a long stretch now, without ever having been informed, and you've been doing fine. Here's what to take. You've been waiting to be told, and waiting has a posture. It keeps you slightly turned toward a room you're no longer in. The information isn't coming. What's already arrived is everything the information would have described. Think about a decision made in a language you don't speak, in a building you've never entered, about a life you're currently living. It's completely real. It's shaping your week, and there is no translation service, and there never will be. That's your situation, and it's better than it sounds. And there's a mercy in that, though it takes a long time to see it as one. Imagine this. The version of you who gets told everything tomorrow, every name, every line, every meeting. Now watch what that person does for the next few years. Watch how many ordinary rooms they can no longer sit in comfortably, and how many decent relationships get reread and ruined by a piece of information that changes nothing about the outcome. That person isn't freer than you. That person has a second life to manage. You're not missing the truth. You're missing the burden of holding it. You're not the one left out. You're the one who gets to keep his ordinary rooms. You're not owed a briefing. You were handed the result the briefing would have described. You're not being kept in the dark. You're being kept out of a room that costs everyone who enters it. Chapter 9. The ones who were told to leave it alone had to explain that to themselves. Here's a cost that lands on the people furthest from the decision, and it never stops running. When something gets shelved, the people who were expecting it to happen don't get an explanation. They just get a change in direction. Imagine this: somebody who'd been quietly told to hold back, waiting for the moment that was coming, and then being told in about 4 words that it isn't. Not why, just that it isn't. Imagine this: that person having to decide what to believe. Either the thing wasn't as certain as they'd been told, or somebody above them lost their nerve, or the person they'd been assured was easy turned out not to be. All 3 of those are unpleasant, and one of them is true. Imagine this: them looking at you differently afterwards. Not with respect exactly, with a kind of wariness, because you're now a person about whom a plan was quietly withdrawn, and they don't know why, and nobody's going to tell them. Or picture the one that changes your daily life without you understanding it. Somebody who used to be casually dismissive of you becoming careful, and you assuming you did something to earn it. You didn't. They were told to leave it, and they've been filling in the reason ever since. Why would that make them careful rather than bolder? Because uncertainty always produces caution in that world. A person you can't confidently move is a person you handle at a distance. Is that why the room changed? That's exactly why the room changed. You've been trying to work out what you did differently. You did nothing differently. A word came down and everybody adjusted, and nobody told you. Doesn't somebody resent me for it? A few do, and it's a resentment they can't act on or explain, which is the only kind that never gets anywhere. Here's the piece worth keeping. You've spent a long time trying to earn the treatment you now get. Being more agreeable, more useful, more careful, hoping the room would soften. The room softened because of a number, not because of your behavior. And that means you can stop paying for it. You've been buying something you already own. Think about a route that gets closed off with no notice and no sign. Everybody who used to take it just goes a different way. Nobody complains. Nobody knows who closed it. And the field beyond it becomes a place people simply don't walk anymore. You're that field, and that means something for how you spend the next stretch of your life. Imagine this: you stopping the small extra effort you've been making to keep the room calm, the additional care, the slight over-explaining, the habit of making yourself easy to be around at a cost you never itemized. Now imagine the room not changing at all, because it isn't responding to your effort. It's responding to a word that came down a long time ago. Everything you've been paying for is already yours. You're not maintaining your standing with all that work. You're just tired. You're not going to lose the room by relaxing in it. You're not obliged to keep buying something that's already been paid for by a number you'll never see. You didn't earn the distance you're given now. It was assigned, and assigned holds better than earned. Chapter 10. You stopped bracing, and that's when the position became permanent. Here at the end, all of it narrows to one thing. There was a stretch when you were braced, every day, waiting for the thing you could feel coming. You didn't call it that. You called it being realistic, or being prepared, or knowing better than to relax. And then at some point you can't identify, you stopped. Imagine this: you realizing you haven't rehearsed the confrontation in a long time. That whole imagined conversation, the one you used to run through while driving, has gone stale and you can't remember how it started. Imagine this, an unexpected message arriving from that world and you reading it without your chest doing anything. You used to feel it in your body before you'd finished the first line. Now it's just a message and you answer it when you get round to it. Imagine this. Somebody telling you something that would have frightened you badly and watching your face and finding nothing there to work with. Not because you were being strong, because the fear had already left and you hadn't noticed it go. Or picture the last one, the one that tells you where you actually stand. You catching yourself making a plan that assumes you'll still be here in a few years. No hedging, no exit clause, just an ordinary assumption that a braced person is incapable of making. But how could not bracing make me safer? Because bracing is a posture and postures are legible. A braced person is a person who believes something is coming, and belief like that shows in 100 small ways that get read by people who read for a living. Why does that matter to the number? Because the whole estimate rests on how you'd respond. A person who's braced has a response. A person who's genuinely stopped expecting it has no response at all, and nothing can be planned around nothing. Was the bracing wasted then? Not wasted. It was accurate at the time. It just outlived the situation the way most of our defenses do, and you carried it years past its usefulness. Here's the last reframe. You've spent this whole message wondering what protected you. It wasn't your caution. Your caution was real and appropriate, and it cost you a great deal of sleep. What protected you is that you kept getting up and living an ordinary life while somebody with a calculator worked out that ordinary lives are the most expensive thing in the world to dismantle. Think about a chess piece that steps off the board entirely. It isn't a move. There's no counter for it, because it isn't in the game. And every strategy in that room was built on the assumption that everything relevant is sitting on those 64 squares. You walked off the edge and kept walking. And here's the last thing, and it's the one to keep. Imagine this, an ordinary morning somewhere ahead of you. Nothing marks it. You're doing something small and dull, and it occurs to you that you haven't scanned a room in months. That the little check you used to run without noticing has simply stopped running. Imagine this. Somebody describing a situation to you that would once have set your whole nervous system going, and you listening to it the way you'd listen to weather in another country. That morning is already scheduled. You don't have to do anything to reach it. You're not recovering from that season. You're on the far side of it, catching up. You're not waiting to be told you're safe. You've been operating on the outcome for a long time already. You're not the person they costed. You're the total that came back, walking around in the world. You didn't survive the assessment. You were the reason it never got signed. And now, chosen one, everything comes full circle. Go back to where this started, a cold fact. Power doesn't move against what it dislikes, it moves against what it can afford. You were disliked. That part was real, and you weren't imagining it, and you never should have talked yourself out of it. You just weren't affordable. Somebody worked out what it would take. The list got longer than anyone expected, because you'd spent years quietly, holding up things nobody had drawn on any plan. The number went to a person who had to put their name on it, and that person put it down and picked up something else. The people who wanted it done have been living with it not being done ever since. And nobody in that chain has ever said one word about any of it to you. The strange season, the pressure that eased into something worse, the nights nobody saw, they weren't punishment. They were the sound of a decision being quietly abandoned above your head. While they were costing you, the universe was making you unaffordable. Go back once more to that first image. A room, a person, a total that came back higher than expected. That number still exists. Nothing has been signed. nothing has been closed. And an unsigned estimate about a person is the one thing that world can't act on, can't discard, and can't ever bring itself to mention. You've spent years believing the silence around you meant you were beneath notice. The silence was the decision. You've been living inside it this whole time, mistaking it for being overlooked. Every quiet month you counted as evidence that you didn't matter was a month nobody could get authorization to touch you. They can still watch you. They will. That part doesn't stop. But watching without a signature is only spectating, and spectators have never once changed an outcome. Your rise isn't coming. It started inside the quiet you misread. Walk into it knowing nobody is holding a signed page with your name on it, because nobody is. If this message hit home, chosen one, like the video and subscribe. Drop 77 in the comments. And share this with someone who's been calling themselves disposable, when they were something far more expensive than that.